That was my outlet, my fantasy. Good things would happen because they always happened in the movie. So I never doubted that I wasn't going to somehow succeed.
What if I told you that America's beloved sweetheart, the woman who brought laughter to millions for decades, secretly carried deep resentment toward some of the most powerful men in Hollywood? What if the kindest and most cherished comedian in television history could not forgive betrayals so severe they permanently changed her? Carol Burnett, a name that instantly evokes warmth, joy, and nostalgia, spent over 6 decades as television royalty, admired for her grace, gentleness, and class. Yet at 90 years old, Carol Burnett finally chose to speak out, and in a rare and brutally honest interview with Rolling Stone magazine, she revealed the names of men who wounded her so deeply that forgiveness remains impossible even now. These were not strangers or passing acquaintances, but men who played critical roles in her professional path and personal life, men who betrayed her trust, sabotaged her career, humiliated her publicly, and broke her heart. Before we reveal who these men were and what they did to Carol Burnett, make sure you hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications, because this story goes far deeper than you expect, and you will not want to miss a single revelation. Drop a comment below and ask yourself if you have ever worked with someone you trusted completely only to be betrayed, because that is exactly what happened to Carol repeatedly. So who were these men, and among them who did Carol Burnett despise more than anyone? Let's find out. For decades, Carol Burnett carefully maintained a public image of warmth, elegance, and unwavering kindness, becoming the woman who tugged her ear at the end of every show as a secret message to her grandmother that everything was okay. She was the comedian who elevated physical comedy into an art form while preserving dignity and heart, yet behind that warm smile was a woman who had been hurt, manipulated, and betrayed by men she trusted. The entertainment industry of the 1960s and 1970s was unforgiving toward women, especially those who demanded creative authority, and Carol fought fiercely for every ounce of respect she earned. She insisted on producing her own show when CBS wanted male executives in control, demanded creative freedom when network leaders tried to dictate content, and although she won those battles, she did so at the cost of making powerful enemies. At 90, Carol Burnett decided it was time to tell the truth, and in her Rolling Stone interview she held nothing back as the journalist noted that her normally bright, laughter-filled voice became quiet and serious when certain names were mentioned. "There are men in this industry," she said carefully, "whom I simply cannot forgive, not because I hold grudges, but because what they did changed me, changed how I trust, changed how I work, and changed who I am." The list included a co-star she once considered her closest creative partner, a husband who betrayed her in the most painful ways imaginable, a Hollywood legend who violated her boundaries late at night, an icon who publicly mocked everything she stood for, and a powerful producer who kept her off one of television's biggest stages for nearly 50 years. Each story is more shocking than the last, but one name rises above all the others, one man Carol Burnett hated more than anyone. And before revealing him, it is necessary to understand the betrayal that nearly destroyed her show and came from the man standing right beside her on stage, Harvey Korman. During the 1970s, the Carol Burnett show dominated American television with an 11-season run, drawing millions of families every Saturday night to watch Carol and her ensemble cast create magic. And at the center of that magic was her partnership with Harvey Korman. They were a perfectly synchronized comedic duo whose chemistry felt effortless, with Carol as the soul and Harvey as the spark, making them seemingly unstoppable as critics hailed them as the greatest comedy team since Lucy and Daisy. Behind the applause and Emmy Awards, however, resentment began to fester, and by 1974, after the show had won its 4th Emmy and received a 3-season renewal, Harvey Korman started to unravel. Costume designer Bob Mackie later revealed that Korman grew increasingly irritable, avoided Carol backstage, complained constantly, and snapped at crew members, creating what felt like a slow-motion crash no one knew how to prevent. Many believed Harvey felt overshadowed by Carol's rising stardom. As the show bore her name, her face dominated promotions, and while he was brilliant, he remained in her orbit rather than his own. That resentment exploded one April afternoon in 1974 at Studio 33 in Television City, in Los Angeles during rehearsals with guest star Petula Clark, when a lighting error left Harvey's face partially shadowed, and he angrily threw his script to the floor, shouting that after all these years no one could get it right. The studio fell silent as director Dave Powers attempted to calm him, but Harvey continued ranting, and then crossed a line by implying that Carol herself did not care about the technical aspects of the show. That remark cut deeply, and Carol Burnett, known for her patience and steady leadership, walked onto the stage and calmly told him that if he could not respect everyone there, he did not need to be there at all. The room froze as Harvey stared at her before walking out alone, while Carol sat in silence for over half an hour staring at his empty chair and quietly saying that she never wanted things to end that way, but he had gone too far. Hours later, headlines exploded across Hollywood as the Los Angeles Herald-Examiner reported that Harvey Korman had walked out mid-rehearsal, and although he eventually apologized and returned, those who witnessed the moment knew their relationship was permanently altered. Harvey remained on the show until 1977 before leaving quietly, and while Carol stayed in touch, their friendship never recovered, later admitting in a 1983 interview that he made her laugh the most and gave her the biggest headaches. That legendary eruption reminded Hollywood how fragile creative partnerships can be when egos collide. And while Carol grew stronger and more protective of her boundaries, the next betrayal would hurt even more because it came from the man who was supposed to love her most, her husband Joe Hamilton. Carol immediately objected to the idea of focusing solely on comedy, explaining that audiences need emotional depth as well as laughter, and that moment marked the start of a growing separation not only in their creative partnership, but also in their personal relationship. As the workload increased, Hamilton became increasingly absent at home, and while Carol initially believed it was simply due to professional demands, rumors soon began to circulate about an affair. In August 1979, TV guides subtly suggested that a veteran producer was involved in a private relationship with a colleague from the editing department, and although no names were mentioned, everyone knew exactly who was being referenced. Several crew members frequently saw Hamilton dining with a young CBS editor at the Smokehouse restaurant near the studio lot. And although Carol never confronted him directly, her close friend Vicki Lawrence later said Carol was devastated after accidentally overhearing co-workers whispering about the overly familiar relationship between Joe and the younger woman. Can you imagine the pain of hearing your own crew gossip about your husband's affair? Because the heartbreak Carol experienced was beyond words. The breaking point arrived in 1982, when Carol's lawyer discovered during a contract review that Hamilton had established Hamilton Productions in Beverly Hills and registered several side projects from the Carol Burnett show under his own name, including Mama's Family, which was based on a sketch Carol herself created, yet she received no ownership credit. According to her biography, Carol confronted him directly in his CBS office and calmly asked whether it was fair to turn something they built together into his personal property, to which Hamilton replied coldly that it was business and not personal, and in that instant everything collapsed. On March 3, 1983, Carol officially filed for divorce in Los Angeles County Superior Court, and the Los Angeles Times ran a headline announcing their split, alongside one of Hollywood's most complex asset battles, as Hamilton demanded full production rights while Carol fought to retain her name and half the revenue. The trial stretched on for nearly a year as reporters camped outside the courthouse daily. Carol remained composed. Hamilton appeared increasingly worn down, and the two barely spoke to each other, until the court ruled in June 1984 that Carol would keep the show's title, while Hamilton received 40% of broadcast profits. When asked how she felt afterward, Carol offered a faint smile and said they had once been a great team until he forgot she was more than just a colleague, a remark that immediately appeared on magazine covers across the country. After the divorce, Carol cut all ties with Hamilton's work, which never regained its former success, and when he died of heart disease in 1991, Carol did not attend the funeral but sent a bouquet of white flowers with a note wishing him peace and saying she would continue moving forward. Years later, Carol reflected that Joe taught her love alone is not enough and that trust matters just as much, explaining that his betrayal cut deeper than any professional slight because he was not only her producer but her husband, the father of her children, and the man she trusted with her career, finances, and heart. As devastating as Joe's betrayal was, another man's behavior shocked her in a different way when a late-night phone call crossed every boundary imaginable. One quiet summer night in July 1972, Carol was asleep in her Coldwater Canyon home when the phone rang sharply at 3 a.m, and she froze upon hearing the unmistakable voice introducing himself as Marlon Brando. At first she believed it must be a prank, but when he mentioned watching reruns of her show, she realized the call was real, politely thanked him, and hoped it would end. But the conversation dragged on for more than 30 minutes as his tone shifted from admiration to something uncomfortably personal. Carol later said she realized she was speaking to the real Brando rather than one of his characters, and when his comments crossed a line, she firmly ended the call, believing that was the end of it. By the next morning, Hollywood erupted as entertainment publications ran sensational headlines, gossip columnists exaggerated the details, and CBS was forced to confirm the call had occurred, leaving Carol furious and worried the public would misinterpret what happened. From that point forward, Carol avoided Brando entirely, ensured she was never photographed near him, and refused to attend events where he might appear, while insiders later confirmed she never again accepted phone calls after midnight. The next shock she faced was even more public when a careless remark at a glamorous Hollywood gala created a permanent rift between her and a legendary film star. At a Beverly Hilton event honoring Cary Grant, Carol approached with the intention of congratulating him, only to hear him dismiss her comedy as silly and undeserving, a comment that dropped across the ballroom in stunned silence. Carol responded calmly but firmly, suggesting people may prefer laughing with someone real rather than with perfection, then walked away, leaving Grant frozen as Hollywood quietly took notice. Media coverage followed, audiences rallied behind Carol, CBS issued a statement defending her human-centered comedy, and while Grant later implied television humor lacked sophistication, Carol chose silence, allowing her show's record-breaking ratings to speak for her. Yet the most puzzling slight of her career came when one of television's most powerful producers excluded her from Saturday Night Live for nearly 50 years, despite her status as a trailblazer in comedy. Behind the scenes, her name was reportedly dismissed as outdated and incompatible with the show's edgy identity, sparking outrage among fans and journalists, while Carol herself responded only with gentle humor when asked, suggesting she simply was not bold enough to be noticed. Decades later, when asked if she regretted never hosting, Carol replied that she did not need them either, reigniting public debate and exposing how one of the most influential women in comedy had been deliberately sidelined. After decades of silence, Carol finally revealed the truth about the men who hurt her most, from professional betrayals and boundary violations to public ridicule and deliberate exclusion. But the man she resented more than anyone was Joe Hamilton, because while others wounded her pride or career, he destroyed her trust. He was the husband who betrayed her love, manipulated her finances, and treated their shared life like a transaction, which is why she could forgive others but never him. And Carol Burnett's story ultimately proves that kindness is not weakness, grace is not surrender, and silence is not acceptance.